Hi, this is Pay Yourself First, TV Cogeco show about your financial success. My name's Jamie Krane. Thanks very much for joining us this week. Well, we're continuing our series in the interviews of the Pythons from Python's Pit here in Halton region. And it's going to be a really exciting event, similar to a Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, where we get real local entrepreneurs and we get an opportunity for them to showcase their products and get some real live investment. So we have another Python with us today. Stick with us. It's going to be a great show. Hi, this is Pay Yourself First. Thanks very much for staying with us. I'm your host, Jamie Krane. Well, again, if you've been watching the last 4 or 5 shows, you've noticed that we've been interviewing some pretty interesting people, and these are what we call Pythons, and self-imposed Pythons. And they're Pythons who are working with the Rotary clubs here in Halton region in a program called Python's Pit. And it's going to be on, we'll talk a little bit about that later on, but it's March 23rd, and it's at the Groot School of Business, McMaster University down here in Burlington. And we're really having an opportunity to meet a lot of really interesting people who are going to be certainly presenting their products. As part of Cogeco's sponsorship with Python's Pit, I have the pleasure of meeting all these really interesting people who we're calling Pythons. And you have an opportunity to meet them here with us today. So we're here in the studio. We have Susanne Mikler. Susanne, welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much. You are with Liaison College.
I am.
And we've all heard of Liaison College. It's a culinary arts school.
It is.
But I'd like to find out, though, a little bit about you, about what makes you tick and how you got to be where you are today. Because one of the things we talk about with our viewers is, you know, if you really want to be able to pay yourself first and you want to be more successful, you need to sometimes break out of that 9-to-5 mold and look for something that's a little bit out there. And certainly you've taken not just certainly a very unique business model and then also turned it into a franchising opportunity, which is pretty exciting. So what's your background? Where did you start? Where did you go to school?
Well, I grew up in Stratford, Ontario. Very hospitable
I love Stratford.
Community. Yeah, it's a great place to live and play. A lot of culture there and food culture. From there, I went to Toronto. When you grow up in a small town, the only thing you can think about is getting out of the small town. And so after high school, I went to Seneca College. I was intrigued by the travel and tourism program. And I finished the program there. It was a 2-year program and lived in Toronto. I ended up coming back to the Stratford and Kitchener area after and working in the hotel business, so in hospitality. I did some work with tours, bus tours and some airlines, but essentially it was the hospitality industry that took me in. And I started to attend at the University of Waterloo, but realized in a hurry that academia was not my strong suit, even though I'm followed by a brother and a sister who almost made a career out of going to school. My brother, for sure. And I just...
Will he be watching this? I don't know.
Probably not. He's out in medicine hat now. So
okay, we can edit that
yeah,
too,
that's okay. Yeah, they both finished university degrees, and somehow, even though it was probably my mom and dad's big dream that I could do that as well, didn't work out. I quickly got into adult education. The funny thing was, working at a hotel in Stratford, and we were looking for staff. A lot of kids go back to school in the fall and you're left with all kinds of vacant positions.
Been there.
Yeah, so I see an ad in the paper. Actually, it was my mother that spotted the ad in the Stratford Beacon Herald, and she said, look at this, there's a school in Kitchener that is teaching hospitality. Perhaps they have grads that could come in and intern at the hotel.
What a great place to recruit.
Right.
Yeah.
So I phoned the school and I said, hello, I'm looking for staff. Do you have any graduates? And they said, actually, we're looking for a teacher for the program. Would you be interested in teaching our hotel and restaurant program? I said, why? It never really occurred to me.
But it's an interesting 90-degree turn from where your
Absolutely. And so here I go into a completely different field, and I absolutely loved it. And playing school, it was just like bringing back all kinds of childhood memories, and now I was doing it for real and being paid.
Right, oh geez, it's the best of both worlds right there.
I could talk for 4 hours and lecture the students and be paid to do so. It was, I'd found my perfect job. And I really enjoyed doing that. And as it turned out, the Toronto School of Business was a franchise private career college. And the owner was absentee. It was right in the mid-'80s during the real estate boom, and the owner was involved in land development all over the place.
Right.
So he was never in the business and needed somebody to help out in the office, organize the business end. So he gave me carte blanche of almost running the office, which was my stepping stone into, wow, I like how these businesses operate. And around that time, I met my future husband, and we ended up involved with the Toronto School of Business on an ownership level. And after a couple of years of doing that...
Against franchisees.
Yes, as franchisees. And the Toronto School of Business model wasn't working out as well for us over the long term because of the structure of the programs. And our philosophy getting into the business is that private career colleges have a niche. They train you for a specific job and then help you find the job.
Right.
Done deal. Well, the programs were getting longer, the career focuses were getting more diluted, and we ended up selling our interests in the Toronto School of Business and going completely off the grid into culinary. So in the mid-'90s, when everybody was focusing on high tech and computers were taking a major leap forward from IBM Selectric typewriters all the way through to,
what?
Remember those?
No?
Yes.
Oh, okay, maybe I do, yeah.
Yeah. And the big AES word processors,
Sure.
and we realized that keeping up with technology was not going to be possible or feasible. And so we looked around for something low tech. So we investigated welding, we investigated aesthetics, massage, back to basics skill training. Then a friend of ours who was running a catering business said, you should really consider cooking because I can't find staff to grow my business. And that was the buzzer for us.
The light bulb went on.
It was the aha moment because the entire premise of a career college is the outcome, which is the job.
Right.
Skill training, get the job. And boy, we looked at each other and said, isn't that interesting? So we started to do a little bit of digging. So there's 26 community colleges in Ontario, and less than half of them teach culinary arts. We didn't know that. So there's a massive shift from low skill to high skill, and the trades were being left behind. And of course, we know what happened shortly after that. Everybody realized that they were going to create this skill shortage down the road if they kept funneling people into IT and white-collar jobs, that there would be a great demand and need. So everybody started shifting towards get a trade, get skills, and so on and so forth. So, and at the same time that we started the culinary school, the Food Network started.
Good timing. Goodness gracious.
So we had sort of the segue into chef was not just a skilled trade anymore. Now it's sexy to be a chef.
Yeah, well, you see it on TV. I mean, my kids watch, you know, the Cake Boss and all these shows, and it really highlights the industry. So you were really looking for something, but you ended up almost being in the right place at the right time and stumbling upon an opportunity that nobody had really capitalized on.
No, it's funny how that works. And when we started up the school, I went back to who I felt would be almost the experts. And having grown up in Stratford, in 1986 they started the Stratford Chef School. And that was the brainchild of a group of restaurateurs in the city who couldn't fill the job needs that they had over the summer.
Smart.
And so in the off season, they turned their restaurants into a culinary school. And the Stratford Chef School is a not-for-profit venture. And so I was able to arouse up one of the founders, and she's now doing fundraising for Bakecrest. It's a senior center in Toronto. Okay. So Adele was able to meet with me and say, whatever you do, don't do a not-for-profit. Well, that had never really entered. You're going into business. You don't really want a not-for-profit. You want for-profit.
Just as an aside, why did she say to avoid not-for-profit? What was her reason behind that?
They felt that their hands were tied, that they were run by a board of directors and they couldn't make good changes and quick changes to the things that they wanted to do. And they felt that that was a real hamper to their business plan. So, of course, the school survived and it's still there. It's still viable. And Liaison College, you know, just went on its own path.
So are they in conflict with you then, or is it sort of complementary to what you're doing, the not-for-profit in So
At the
we don't have a
Stratford Chef
franchise.
School?
You don't have a franchise in
No,
Stratford.
no, no. They're a standalone school, and they have a niche. They're in Stratford. They're promoting a very different program than we are.
More of a local thing.
Yeah, and they're also a much longer program. So that's the other difference between us and community colleges and private career colleges in general. We do things in a condensed manner. So people don't need to take 2 years off to, learn our skill.
That was one
do
thing
it in a short
I was
period.
perusing your website.
Okay.
And that was one of the things I noticed, that you have, I guess, about 8 different course paths that you can take.
Right.
And it can be flexible. I mean, it can be evening classes, it can be day classes.
Yes.
You can start halfway through and continue, so it doesn't matter actually when you start. You don't have to start at prescribed times.
That's right.
Is that correct? And
we have intakes every 5 weeks. And the classes are half days or evenings. They're short-term or long-term programs. There's a lot of different options. So, as we say, there's a lid for every pot. There's a program for anybody that's interested in some training.
where was your first location?
We opened our first location. We converted a dental office, if you can believe it, on a 3-story walk-up in Mississauga, in Cooksville.
Okay.
Dundas and here, Ontario area. And the premise there was very small, but we worked with an architect, and she went and scouted out George Brown College, who we felt was the pinnacle of culinary training at the time. And so she went there and she looked at their kitchens, she talked to some of their chefs, and she came back and she drew up a plan, an architectural drawing of how to work out the space. And we constructed it, and we started our first class, and it was our admissions recruiting officer who said, "Boy, this is so fulfilling. I love this. We are creating dreams for these people." And he created our tagline, "Feed your passion." He said, "I just feel like I'm feeding everyone's passion. They come in and they're so excited about a future and a possibility of becoming a chef." And he said, I'd like to do this. And he was from Hamilton. So we opened our first franchise a year later in Hamilton.
Okay, hold that thought, because we're going to talk about franchising in a second.
Okay.
But it's exciting. So that's your first location, was in Cooksville. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about how you funded that, because that's always one of the biggest concerns of entrepreneurs starting up. Is how do I find the funding?
Yes.
So we'll talk about that in a second. Don't go away, ladies and gentlemen. This is a great discussion. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Don't go away.
You're watching TV Cogeco, truly local television.
And we're back. Thanks for staying with us. Fastest 5 minutes you've ever experienced, I bet. Well, we're discussing the Python's Pit with Susanne Mikler from Culinary Arts School.
Liaison College.
Liaison College, of course. I know that. I've practiced that 100 times. And so Liaison College, very interesting. So you found a niche that nobody was in.
Right.
You were in kind of a franchising opportunity before that was similar, but not as quite as specialized as maybe you would have liked. And you stumbled onto a niche that needed to be filled. So you built your first location. Do you mind if I ask, how did you fund that? Because that's one of our biggest concerns of our viewers is, I want to start a business, but how do I find the funding to do that?
Right. Well, when we started the Toronto School of Business a number of years prior, we had private investment. We found out very quickly going to the banks that unless you have lots of equity and that unless everything collapses, they can take your house away or something, that they're not prepared to loan money. So by the time Liaison College came around, we funded it with our own resources. So
So basically use some equity that you would maybe gain over here in the other
right,
operation.
Right. And I think that the one thing that I would recommend to any entrepreneur is make sure that you have a solid footing in real estate of some sort that you can show equity in, because that is what the banks will loan money on.
Right.
Is on your home.
Right. Scary as that is sometimes.
It is, but I mean, that's the plunge that you're going to take.
Yeah, our second Subway store we financed with a line of credit on the house. And
right.
We were fortunate enough to have a private mortgage on the house, that wasn't registered, so we had lots of equity supposedly sitting over here.
Yes, exactly. Well, sometimes you have to think creatively on things like that, and I think by the time we were into Liaison College mode, we'd had our bumps in the road financially, and we're looking at this from a we'd like to finance it ourselves, because when you're at the mercy of the bank, sometimes it's very, very hard to do business.
Well, certainly, and you have somebody else you need to answer to oftentimes too, which
Yes.
is sometimes good, but sometimes not so good, especially when they're meddling in your business and you
Well,
want to
exactly.
have free reign. And, okay,
That's
so
right.
now, so you opened up a location in Cooksville.
Yes, we did.
And how did it lead you into franchising?
Well, we had our employee was, he was the recruiter. So in our business, we place advertisements strategically, and students will call, or interested students will call, and they are recruited by an admissions representative. So they explain the courses, they explain the start dates, the fee structures, and so forth, and then they go through the enrollment process. And this individual was meeting people who were so excited about the prospect of cooking and living their dream job, so doing something that they just love to do. And he was completely enthralled with it and said, look, I'd love to duplicate this. Would you
What better
consider
way
franchising?
to find out about it than being involved in it? And I
Yes.
guess he just got excited by
He got very excited
by everybody else's reactions
Yes.
to what you were bringing
Yes.
to the market. And, that's
we didn't really think that the franchising model would be our cup of tea. We thought perhaps we'd have 3 or 4 stores that we could comfortably manage on our own, or find managers to operate. The thing that we liked about franchising is that the owner-operator is at the business,
Right.
and involved in
Hands-on,
the
right?
business. Exactly.
That's
And
crucial.
when you're dealing with students, then they are receiving their service over a period of time. And so they're not a customer that is going to be buying something and leaving the store and then that's it. This is a prolonged service agreement that you have, and so the individuals involved, your customers, are there on a daily basis,
Right.
and are continually monitoring the service that they're being provided. And having the owner-operator on site actually allows that student to get the best possible service, because things can happen in
You
a
have a
snap.
financial responsibility in what goes on, or a financial interest in what goes on, as opposed to an employee or
Exactly.
manager who doesn't. Sure,
That's
Subway has
exactly
the
right.
Same, well, it's interesting. Subway, one of the largest franchise organizations in the world, but
Fantastic.
they subscribe to the exact same thought process.
Yes.
For sure. You need to be there, hands-on.
Yes.
So that's great. So now, how did he? I don't know if I'm getting too prying, but how did he fund the franchise?
Well, we did have, when we set up the franchise model, after he gave us the idea. So we said, well, okay, we would have to consider that and think about it. So we went back to our seasoned pros, which is the same lawyer that we've used since day one, who was a referral from our accountant, who is a high school chum of my husband's.
Perfect.
So very, very well positioned, and very, very knowledgeable and sound business advice from the two of those. And between the two of them, they said, these are the things that you'll need. And they had some connections, and the accountant's actually in Burlington, so that worked out well. And we struck a deal with the Royal Bank.
Ah, okay.
Oddly enough, they're funding
What an interesting
the
coincidence.
Python's Pit, their
Yeah.
sponsor, a major sponsor. So the Royal Bank came along, and they were trying to do business development. They had a new branch in Burlington. The bank manager and his colleagues were actively seeking business opportunities. It was a business branch. And we presented our model, we gave them the history, etc. We went through the entire franchise development process, which was interesting from the franchisor's perspective, because as a franchisee, you don't know all of that background stuff,
Sure.
but the disclosure documents and the due diligence process.
There's a lot to it.
Oh, it's very intense. It's very intense. And so we went on this very robust journey of tracking down all the pieces to fit together. And when we had them all together, we went back to the franchisee, our employee, and said, here's what we have put together.
Right.
And he said, yes, I'm very interested.
So they put together basically a franchise package that allows them to step in and maybe help fund the franchisees.
That's right.
With the franchisees put in a certain amount of equity, they'll put in a
That's
certain
right.
amount.
That's
because they know
exactly
the
right.
business process.
They were prepared to offer, based on the franchisees' cash input to start the business. They were willing to fund on the basis of the term of the franchise agreement.
Right.
So there was also knowing that in the event that the fallback position was that we, franchisor, were going to be the leaseholders.
Right.
So we have the main lease. In the event that there was any issue with the business, that we were able to take immediate control of the situation, and the bank would therefore not be out any.
Right. You protect the bank's interest at the same time.
Right.
Subway had the exact same thing in place
Right.
that helped us open our first
Yes,
store,
exactly. So, I mean, from that perspective, you have to deal with the banks to the rules that they want to in order to help your franchisees to get to their goals.
Right. But it's a win-win.
It's a totally
Everybody
win-win.
wins.
No, it was a perfect scenario.
So how many franchises do you have now?
We have 11.
11 franchises.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That must keep
thanks.
you busy, though.
It keeps us very
busy. So your
busy.
job now is really monitoring the franchisees to make sure that they're doing everything the way they're supposed to be doing.
That's right. The idea of operating the business is not just franchise compliance. We have a whole other sector that we have to deal with called the Ministry of Training, colleges and universities. They're our licensing body.
Right.
And so in order for us to be able to give a student a diploma when they finish their program, we have to go through the registration process with the ministry.
Right.
So there are two compliance matters on the board at all times. One is the franchise system and the other is the ministry.
You need to make sure when the students graduate, they are getting accredited and they're able to take that with them.
Absolutely.
So you help them with funding and you help them with placement and all kinds of things. Again, you can go to the website. What's your website?
It's liaisoncollege.com.
Liaisoncollege.com.
And chefcollege.ca. It's the same website. We put chefcollege.ca out there because everyone wants to spell liaison with only one I.
Oh. Rule number one, make your name easy to spell.
Yes,
for people.
well, liaison was an interesting name choice for us because it has the meaning for our business of bridging the gap between the student and their career and employment, which was, we thought, a great moniker. Then we realized, oh, we're a bilingual country. Liaison is actually a French word. Then, of all things, in our culinary textbook, liaison is in fact a culinary term.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I
Yes,
did not know that.
it's a liaison is a sauce thickener using eggs.
Okay.
So when students start, their
yeah.
very first homework is look up the name of the school in your textbook.
That's right, smart. You know, I've heard other people do, though, if there's a misspelling or a very common misspelling,
Yes.
then register that too.
Yes, we have that registered as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
and now Google, they'll just tell you
correct
right
it
away.
anyway.
Did you mean liaison with two I's?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Okay. I can talk about how you did this all day long.
Okay.
I'm just fascinated by it, and congratulations. I'm really happy
Thank you.
for you that things are going very well. But we need to talk about a little bit about Python's Pit. Why Python's Pit?
Python's Pit is an interesting opportunity, and I'm not a Rotarian, but I was approached by someone in the Halton, actually the Burlington Rotary Club, and said they're looking for a female python. They have a numerous amount of males that have stepped up to the plate, but they're looking for a female. And I said, well, I've been called worse than a python before, but okay. And I met Farine Samji.
Yeah,
and
sure. Very dynamic. We've had her on the show.
wow. I met her and she shook my hand and I thought, woo, I just felt the tingle go up and down my arm. And
Funny how that works.
I said, oh, she's a powerhouse. And so we had a really lovely chat at a coffee house in Burlington, and she said, I'm going to go back to my committee with the recommendation, but she said, I think I've nailed it. And I said, well, wow, I think I've nailed it. Just meeting her was the icing on the cake for me.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be, I'm going to be there in the audience for the evening session anyway, but I'm sure it's going to be very fulfilling for you. Wouldn't it be awesome to have something come down the pipe that is the next big thing, and you have the ability to help that person springboard that into big retail?
I am so excited about that. I mean, you know, the idea of not just finding a new business venture, but the whole notion of being able to mentor some of these young entrepreneurs, because the high school category was really an exciting category.
Well, I'm sure you went through a lot of the School of Hard Knocks as you were learning to do what you're doing now. And,
Yes.
And I guess, you know, having the ability to sort of smoothen that out for somebody or help them see things that maybe they're not seeing, it can help them exponentially, right?
That is so true, and we relied on that so much as we were growing. You know, our legal and accounting advisors were really our mentors, and there was others along the way as well. I mean, I'm sure you would say the same. There's always somebody that you went to as a sounding board.
100%.
And really, that to me is what a mentor is all about.
Right. So now, and you're really actually putting in your own money. This isn't play. You guys are actually putting in your own cash into this.
Right. Each of the pythons have committed $25,000 or more. Or more. If the right deal comes along, you never know.
Sure,
yeah, it's very exciting.
So now, can you tell us a little bit about the process that's going to happen? Because I know that we've talked a little bit about it briefly. There's a student field and there's an open field. How does that
Right,
work?
there were two categories. So they sent a call out to high school students, and it's an opportunity for students to pitch a business opportunity for cash. So it's really like a business plan project, and they've narrowed it down to 6 finalists or 5 finalists who will pitch in front of the panel. And there's no deals going to be made unless there's something maybe after
Right.
after
It's
the
more of a
show.
scholarship.
It's more of a scholarship thing. And the DeGroote School of Business has jumped in, and they've worked with all of the applicants to get them down to the final cast of presenters, as well as offering mentorship. And the Rotary Club has jumped in with just an amazing amount of support in kind.
They're a great group. Anyway.
I am blown away by their layers.
Maybe they're secretly trying to recruit you. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. That's quite possible. In any event, the high school category is very interesting. So that's for cash scholarships and a bunch of other prizes as well. And RBC has just been fantastic in all of the sponsorship and not just money, but the in-kind and the help that they're giving out is just great. The other category is the other category, other. So anybody that's not in high school has been able to put in their business plan. So the business plans have been scrutinized by MBA students at DeGroote, which is part of McMaster, their School of Business, and they've narrowed it down to 6. So the 6 finalists are going to come on March 23rd and make their presentations. I believe they have 5 minutes, something very shocking to get all that out in 5 minutes. And then we have a chance to consider, ask some questions, Q&A session. They're calling it due diligence, but we all know that that's...
What a broad term that
right.
is, yeah.
And at the end, if there's any interest there whatsoever, a deal can be struck
There's no
that
jokes.
day.
This is the real thing. This is the real opportunity for these
Oh,
folks.
this is very, very real. And of course, after the presentations are made, even if a deal is struck, there's always the after show situation. So at the end, somebody will walk away potentially with a marketable business opportunity that's going to be funded.
Well, if I was a presenter, I certainly would love the opportunity to work with you. That would be terrific. Thanks very much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank
Susanne.
you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Pay Yourself First, TV Cogeco show about your financial success. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Hi, thanks for staying with us. This is Pay Yourself First, TV Cogeco show about your financial success. What a great interview. Susanne Mikler from Liaison College. And we neglected to mention her business partner slash husband is Rudy Florio. So if you're interested in anything like that, in getting into a career in that field, certainly you want to look at Liaison College as a great opportunity. Python's Pit is March 23rd. It's at the DeGroote School of Business at the Ron Joyce Center in Burlington. And we have 2 sessions, of course. There's one, I think it starts in the afternoon. One starts at 2:30 to 5. That's the student category. And then 7 to 9:30 is the open category. Tickets are available now. And you should get some tickets if you want to be there. It's filling up real fast.